You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this like comforting expectation of precision. It really feels like engineering.
Oh, absolutely. It's very straightforward.
Right, you fall off a bike, you break your arm, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line. And the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. There's the problem.
Yeah, it's entirely binary. I mean, it's either broken or it's not broken. You can see it, you can cast it, and you can track the healing process on a really predictable timeline.
But then you step into the world of our nervous system.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different
It
story.
really is. You start looking at our daily mental health, and suddenly that beautiful, precise x-ray machine is, well, it's completely useless.
Totally useless, yeah.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, quite honestly, pretty murky. There's no check engine light that magically flips on your forehead when you're running on fumes.
Which would be really convenient, honestly.
Right. But instead, you just get this creeping, heavy sense that something in your operating system is fundamentally glitching.
Which is, the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah.
The real challenge with a burnt-out nervous system is that the symptoms don't look like a disease.
Right. They just look like life.
Exactly. They just look like, a really stressful Tuesday.
And that is the exact reason we're doing this deep dive today. We have a fascinating mission. We are taking a look at the modern approach to mental health, how we biologically regulate our nervous systems, and crucially, the actual real-world logistics of getting accessible care.
And we have some really great material to work from today.
We do. We are exploring all of this through a really unique lens today. We have a stack of internal and external communications from a real-world clinical practice. It's called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
Yeah, and these aren't old textbook theories either.
No, these notes are incredibly fresh. They're dated today, actually, April 13th, 2026.
I love this approach, by the way. Using a single operating clinic as a case study is just a brilliant way to understand the broader landscape.
It makes it so much more concrete, right?
Exactly. Looking at what a therapy practice is actively communicating to the public gives us a real-time pulse on what actual people are struggling with right now, out in the real world.
And to you listening right now, whether you are like absolutely crushing it at your job, or you're feeling inexplicably exhausted by 2 in the afternoon, or you're just curious about how modern therapy is being communicated and structured behind the scenes, well, there's a massive aha moment waiting for you in these notes.
Oh, for sure. There's something in here for everyone.
Because these sources break down exactly how we live, how we struggle, and how we actually heal. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start by looking at the biology of burnout, because the source material lists 3 specific physical signs that your nervous system is running on overdrive.
Yeah, the morning topic section goes right into this.
Right, so the first one they point out is being bone tired but unable to fall asleep.
Which, I mean, that feels like a cruel joke when it happens to you. You're exhausted, yet you're just wide awake staring at the ceiling.
It really does. When I read that, I immediately thought about a smartphone. You know when your phone is at 1% battery?
Oh, yeah. The red battery icon of doom.
Exactly. The screen is dimming, it's begging for a charger, but you can't actually get it to power down to recharge because there are inexplicably a dozen heavy, invisible background apps running.
That's the worst.
Right. The phone is just frozen, draining the last of its power and running hot to the touch. That is exactly what this type of insomnia feels like.
That is a phenomenal analogy for the biological mechanism at play here. What's fascinating here is that the source material explicitly frames this, not as a character flaw, and certainly not as a weakness or a lack of discipline.
So it's not just me being bad at sleeping.
No, not at all.
Mm.
It is pure evolutionary biology.
Yeah.
This is your body physically stuck in fight or flight mode.
So the alarm bells are ringing, but there's no actual fire in the room. Why does our body do that to us?
To understand that, we really have to look at how our brains evolved. Our fight or flight system is driven by this tiny almond-shaped part of the brain called the amygdala.
Right, the lizard brain kind of thing.
Exactly. And it's designed for acute physical threats. Like a predator jumps out, your amygdala floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, you run away, and this is the key part, the threat ends.
Okay, so the system is supposed to turn off.
Yes, the biological stress cycle closes, but today, the threats don't end. When life is relentless, which the text specifically calls out, the predator is a looming deadline or, a stressful commute or financial pressure.
So the tiger is basically just my email inbox.
Pretty much. The threat never physically leaves the room. So your body adapts by staying on permanent high alert. You are running those heavy background apps of survival, pumping out stress hormones.
Wow. So of course you can't sleep even when you're exhausted to your bones.
Right. Your nervous system literally believes it is not safe to power down. If it powers down, the email tiger gets you.
That makes so much sense. Which perfectly sets up the second sign they list, which is little things making you snap and then feeling terrible about it immediately after.
Because your emotional buffering system is just completely depleted.
Yeah, you have zero margin for error.
Exactly. If your baseline is fight or flight, your brain is already operating at like a 9 out of 10 on the stress scale.
Right.
So the slightest friction of a spilled glass of milk, a slightly rude email, pushes you to a 10.
It's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
It is. It feels biologically like a life-threatening event to your system. Your reaction is disproportionate because your system is misinterpreting the data. And then once the logical part of your brain finally catches up, the guilt sets in.
And that guilt is incredibly heavy. It feeds right into the third sign they identify, which is constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Oh, the hypervigilance.
Yeah, that pervasive feeling of hypervigilance. You can't even enjoy a quiet Sunday morning because your system is actively scanning the horizon for the next disaster.
Which raises a really important question. What do we typically do when we feel this cascade of symptoms?
Oh, usually just ignore it, right?
Yeah, we try to muscle our way through it. We treat it as a productivity problem. We tell ourselves to just push harder, to ignore the exhaustion.
We chug another cold brew and just try to survive the week.
We do. But the source material offers a profound pivot here. It states that the goal of therapy isn't to just white-knuckle your way through the stress.
Right.
The goal is to actively learn how to regulate that overloaded nervous system.
I really appreciate that phrase, white knuckle. It paints such a vivid, visceral picture of just gripping the steering wheel of your life so tightly that your hands actually hurt. You're just praying you don't crash the car.
Yeah, you're just bracing for impact.
But the alternative, which is regulation, means actually pulling the car over, popping the hood, and fixing the engine.
It's moving from a state of pure survival to a state of equilibrium. And we need to be really clear here. That is a learned physiological skill.
It's not something you just naturally know how to do.
No, not when you're that burnt out. A therapist helps you learn to literally downshift your nervous system out of fight or flight so your body can actually rest, rather than just collapsing from pure exhaustion.
But wait, this brings up a huge mental hurdle for me. If we look at the CHC documentation, they tackle this, but I want to play devil's advocate and push back on it a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, well, sure, I snap at my kids sometimes and I'm a bit numb, I'm also inevitably thinking, but my life isn't falling apart.
Right, the I'm not that bad argument.
Yeah, I have a roof over my head. Isn't therapy overkill for that? I mean, resources in healthcare are genuinely finite. If I take an hour of a therapist's time just because I'm feeling a little stressed, aren't I taking a spot away from someone who is in an actual acute crisis?
I am so glad you brought that up, because that specific guilt is the single most common barrier to entry for mental health care today.
It really is. We feel bad for taking up space.
We do. We have this deep-seated belief that mental health resources are a strict zero-sum game. But the source material specifically targets this exact myth. It actively dismantles the idea that therapy is only for people with serious problems.
Okay, but how do they address the finite resource argument? Because there are only so many therapists out there, right?
They address it by fundamentally reframing how we view mental maintenance versus mental triage. The modern therapy infrastructure, which we'll get into shortly, is built to scale. But conceptually, they use these incredibly grounded comparisons in the midday topic section.
Oh, right, the analogies.
Yeah, they argue that claiming therapy is only for serious problems is like saying the gym is only for elite athletes.
Which is completely absurd when you say it out loud.
It really is.
Imagine walking past a local gym, seeing someone jogging on a treadmill and just tapping on the glass to say, "Excuse me, are you training for the Olympics?"
Right, and if they say no,
And then get off the machine, sir. This facility is for professionals only.
it's ridiculous. Or their other analogy from the text, which is saying cooking is only for professional chefs.
Right. You can't make an omelet unless you have a Michelin star.
Exactly. We inherently understand that physical fitness and nutrition are basic maintenance activities for everyday human beings. We praise people for preventative care in those areas.
Yeah, we don't wait until we have a massive heart attack to decide to go for a brisk walk or eat a vegetable.
Exactly. Yet we apply this incredibly punitive gatekeeping standard to our emotional and cognitive health.
We literally wait for the emotional heart attack before we think we're allowed to get help.
We do. And to really drive this home and shatter that gatekeeping, The text details specific personas, basically everyday people who absolutely belong in therapy.
Let's look at those personas because they hit very close to home. The first one is the parent who loves their kids but keeps losing patience.
And notice how this connects directly back to the biology we just discussed.
Oh, right, the depleted buffering system.
Exactly. This is not a bad parent.
Mm-hmm.
This is a loving parent whose nervous system is so chronically fried that they're snapping. Therapy offers them the physiological tools to regulate. And when a parent regulates, it fundamentally shifts the environment of the entire household.
Wow, so it's really preventative care for the whole family.
Absolutely.
Then there's the second persona the text mentions, which is the person who seems fine on paper but hasn't felt actual joy in months.
That absence of joy is a critical diagnostic indicator. There's a clinical term for this. It's called anhedonia.
Anhedonia.
Yes. It essentially translates to the neurological blunting of pleasure. You don't have to be actively weeping every day to be struggling.
Sometimes it's just feeling nothing at all.
Right. Sometimes the struggle isn't sadness, it's a void.
Mm-hmm.
It's eating your favorite meal and it tastes like cardboard.
Yeah.
It's realizing that the color has just drained out of your life.
That's terrifying, honestly. And the third persona, which I guarantee is going to resonate with a lot of people listening right now, is the highly functional professional who is absolutely crushing it at work, but completely falling apart the second they get home.
Ah, yes. High-functioning burnout.
The classic.
This is the person who uses all their available energy, all their executive function, to just hold the mask in place for their boss, their clients, and their colleagues.
They look like a superstar on paper.
They do.
Yeah.
But it takes everything they have. So the moment they walk through their front door and drop the mask, they just collapse. Their family only ever gets the empty, exhausted shell of a person.
And the ultimate takeaway from the source material for all of these people is just so incredibly freeing. It simply says, you don't need to be in crisis to get support. You just need to be human.
It completely normalizes the baseline human struggle. You do not need a tragedy to justify taking care of your own mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we accept this premise, if we agree that therapy is for everyone and you just need to be human to benefit from it, then the immediate roadblock is logistical.
Always is.
Right. How do you actually get millions of exhausted, anhedonic, high-functioning but burnt-out people in front of a professional? Because if you have thousands of people suddenly realizing they need to regulate their nervous systems, how does a practice actually serve them without losing that human, personalized touch?
That transition takes us perfectly into the infrastructure data we have for coping and healing counseling.
Yeah, the logistics of it all.
Looking at the structure of this specific practice, which was founded by Elias Joseph, gives us a real masterclass in answering that exact question of scale versus empathy.
Right. Because if we look at the traditional model of therapy, it is full of friction.
Immense friction. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the old model was incredibly localized and rigid.
You had to physically go somewhere.
Exactly. You had to find an office within a 20-minute drive. You had to coordinate your work schedule, fight through traffic, find parking, and then sit in a sterile waiting room under fluorescent lights with strangers, feeling incredibly vulnerable.
And let's be honest, that friction alone is enough to stop the fine but joyless person from ever making an appointment.
Oh, easily.
If I'm already running on a 1% battery, as we talked about earlier, the idea of a 40-minute round-trip commute in rush hour traffic just to talk about my feelings is going to feel literally impossible.
It is impossible for many, but CHC operates on a 100% telehealth model.
A completely virtual infrastructure. And the text notes it's fully secure video, IPAA compliant.
Which is an important technical detail. To strip away the administrative jargon, being IPAA compliant on a video platform means they are using bank-level encryption for your medical conversations.
So nobody is hacking into your therapy session.
Exactly. It ensures absolute privacy. But the real magic of this model is what it does to the barrier of entry. By removing the waiting room and the commute, they allow patients to engage in therapy from the safety of their own couch.
Which has to be better for the nervous system, right?
100%. Biologically, your nervous system is already going to settle faster if you are in a familiar, safe environment, maybe with your pet next to you, rather than a clinical office.
That makes so much sense. And geographically, it changes everything. The data shows they serve all 159 counties in the state of Georgia.
Think about the scale of that. From the densest, most traffic-heavy parts of Atlanta to the most rural corners of the state where there might not be a single brick-and-mortar mental health professional for 50 miles.
It is democratizing access on a massive scale.
It really is.
But a platform is just software. Who is actually on the other side of the screen? I saw a lot of acronyms in the source text regarding their staff.
Yes, the data highlights a culturally competent team of over 15 licensed therapists. And you're right, there is a lot of alphabet soup in the text.
Yeah, what do all those letters mean?
Well, there's LCSWs, which are licensed clinical social workers, LPCs, licensed professional counselors, and LMFTs, licensed marriage and family therapists.
Okay, got it.
But what that actually means for the patient is that CHC has built a diverse spectrum of care under one virtual roof.
So depending on what you're dealing with, they can match you with the right specialist.
Exactly.
The text lists individual therapy, couples counseling, family sessions, teen therapy for ages 13 and up, and even general life coaching. Plus, they cover specialties ranging from everyday anxiety and stress to heavy clinical hitters like trauma, PTSD, grief, and complex relationship issues.
But here is the most critical piece of this entire infrastructure, and it ties right back to removing the barriers we discussed earlier.
The cost.
Yes. We can talk about secure video and diverse specialists all day, but if it costs $200 out of pocket per session, the exhausted parent who is snapping at their kids is just going to say, well, I can't justify taking that money away from my family's grocery budget.
Exactly. The financial friction is the ultimate gatekeeper.
The financial reality is where this case study becomes truly revolutionary. CHC accepts Medicaid with a $0 copay.
Wait, $0?
$0.
I want to pause on that because taking the cost to absolute zero for Medicaid patients is generational cycle-breaking stuff. It allows lower-income families to access the exact same nervous system regulation as anyone else.
It removes the final excuse. And for those with commercial insurance, the text notes they accept major providers like Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Humana.
All the big ones.
Right. And the copays for those are listed at $10 to $40 a session.
$10 to $40. Let's analyze why that specific price point matters. It shifts therapy from a massive luxury purchase to essentially the cost of a utility bill or a couple of streaming services.
It's extremely manageable.
You're at home, your privacy is protected by encryption, you have access to a massive diverse team of experts, and it costs the same as ordering a pizza. It strips away every single logistical and financial excuse you might use to delay getting help.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most profound barrier.
Oh, this is the good stuff.
We've spent this deep dive looking at the biology of why we need help, the societal myths that stop us from getting it, and the physical logistics that make it possible. But there is a purely psychological barrier of timing that the source material addresses beautifully.
Oh man, you are talking about the evening topic from the CHC communications. This section really made me stop and think.
It completely shifts the conversation from how to get therapy to when we allow ourselves to start.
When I read this part of the text, I immediately thought about the concept of life's invisible timeline.
It's a heavy burden.
It is. It is so incredibly easy to feel like you're running a phantom race, you're sprinting on a track, and you're always looking over your shoulder, terrified that you're lagging behind someone else's highlight reel.
We'll all do it.
We tell ourselves, I should have my career figured out by now. I should be perfectly healed from my childhood by now. I should be handling my stress better than this at my age.
We are biologically wired to assess our standing in the tribe, right? So we constantly measure our internal messy reality against a clock that doesn't actually exist. We judge ourselves against the curated external lives of others.
The highlight reel.
Exactly. And the evening topic from the source confronts this directly. It is designed as a purely motivational message meant to catch people at the end of a long, exhausting day. It simply says, just in case nobody told you today, you are not behind.
You are not behind on healing. Not behind on having it figured out. Not behind on life's invisible timeline.
It is a radical statement of radical acceptance. It's really designed to dismantle the profound shame of feeling like you're late to your own life.
And what I found so powerful about that message is the specific call to action. It says, you're right where you are. And that's the only place healing can actually start.
Because it's reality.
Right. Because if you are constantly furious with yourself for not being 5 miles further down the road, you can't actually take the one step that is right in front of you.
You are fighting reality. You cannot navigate a map if you are actively lying to yourself about your starting coordinates.
You have to drop the pin where you actually are, even if where you are is exhausted, snappy, and running on 1% battery.
And they end with this quiet profound piece of advice. They say, if something in you is saying maybe it's time, trust that voice.
That's beautiful.
Notice that it's not a high-pressure medical sales pitch. It's simply an invitation to honor your own internal compass.
Trust that voice. So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at these communications from this case study, we really see a complete roadmap for modern mental health.
We really do.
We start by recognizing the sheer biological realities of a fried nervous system, understanding the mechanism behind the exhaustion, the disproportionate snapping, and that constant hypervigilance.
And we drop the destructive societal myth that you have to wait for a total crisis, a complete mental breakdown, before you are allowed to seek help. We recognize that simply being a human being navigating a stressful world qualifies you for maintenance and support.
We understand that the logistical and financial infrastructure actually exists now to support you right where you are. Through secure telehealth models, through Medicaid, through accessible commercial insurance copays, the help is no longer behind an impossible wall of friction.
And finally, we realize that we aren't behind schedule. The timing for healing is simply whenever we decide to drop the pin on our map and listen to that voice that says, maybe it's time.
It is an incredibly empowering shift in perspective. And if you are listening to this and that voice is whispering to you, the case study we looked at today, Coping and Healing Counseling, is a perfect example of what's out there. You can actually look at the source of our data today by visiting their website at khztherapy.com to see how this model works in practice.
Or reach out to them directly. The text mentions you can email them at support@che30therapy.com or even call them at 404-832-0102.
It is all about recognizing that taking care of your mind is just taking one small, regulated step forward.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered the biology of the amygdala, the myths of gatekeeping, the infrastructure of telehealth, and the psychology of timing. But as always, we want to leave you with something to chew on long after this deep dive is over.
We talked a lot about that phantom race and life's invisible timeline. It is a powerful metaphor from the text. But consider this. If that invisible timeline is entirely made up, like a complete fiction constructed by societal pressure and other people's curated highlight reels, what would happen if you simply decided to step off the track today?
Just walk right off.
Yeah. How much of your current bone-deep exhaustion isn't actually from the real, tangible work you're doing, but from the heavy, invisible burden of measuring yourself against a clock that doesn't actually exist?